If you have a home shop, this project is an absolute necessity.
1, 2, 3!
So a while back, I got an Instagram notification showing me this wild picture of a push stick that somebody was selling that had the picture of 2 fingers, or like a shape of a hand with 2 fingers cut off. Now, it's a fairly common joke around the carpentry community that you're not a real carpenter unless you've cut at least a finger off on a table saw or a bandsaw or something like that. Table saws are even notorious for taking fingers off if you don't use the proper safety equipment. One of those pieces of safety equipment is a finger saver or a push stick. So today we're gonna be making a wooden push stick that can be used to push pieces through a table saw or a bandsaw while keeping your fingers clear of the blades. So the first step is to find a piece of wood that's going to be cheap enough to be used as a piece of scrap wood, but also sturdy enough and long enough to be used as a push stick. We need this piece to be about 14 inches long and no more than 1 inch wide. The reason we need it so skinny is so that we can squeeze it between the fence and the blade guard if we're making small pieces on the table saw. So here in our scrap pile, we've got this piece of cedar fence picket. It's perfect. It's just under 3/4 of an inch. It's cheap wood, it's cedar, so it smells amazing, keeps bugs away, but we've got enough of it laying around that we can use it as a scrap piece. If it gets cut up in the table saw because it gets really close to the blade, that's just fine. So now we're gonna cut it to the length that we need because this piece is about 3 feet long and we don't need all 3 feet. The next thing is, this has got a lot of burring on it because it's fence picket, so it's kind of got this rough surface about it, and we're gonna sand all that off to make it one nice flat piece of, what you think of when you think of a plank of wood. And this helps really reveal the grain and just make it a nice piece to look at. On top of that, it makes it easy to laser engrave, which is how we're gonna put the image of the hand onto the piece of wood. So to start the laser engraving process, we need to make the image of the hand. This is not something I could find on Google or anything like that. Sometimes you can just look up images and find free images. This is not one of those things. So I actually went into Canva, found a vector image of just like a 2-dimensional vector art hand. We don't want it super realistic because it doesn't need to be gross, it just kind of needs to be funny. And then I used some of the other vector rectangles and images to kind of chop off the last 2 fingers of the vector hand. Once I had the design, I loaded it into Luben and measured our piece of wood for the laser engraver. With a piece of wood measured, we're able to size our vector engraving and make it the size that we need it to fit the plank of wood. We're gonna go ahead and generate a G-code path. This basically sets us how deep we want it to engrave, how dark we want it to engrave, how detailed do we want it to engrave. And I'm choosing fairly middle of the ground parameters here. I don't want it to take forever, but I'd also want it to look good. The big thing here is I want it to be dark enough so that I can sand this piece without the engraving coming out later. So now that I've got all that set up, I just send that G-code file to the laser engraver and have it laser engrave our piece of cedar. Now that it's engraved, we're gonna take it downstairs and start actually drawing out the design of the push stick itself. So the idea here is that we're gonna have a long piece of wood that keeps our hands away from wood pieces going through the table saw. We want our fingers at least 6 inches away from the blades at any given time. So we're gonna create a handle on one end and we're gonna create a right angle on the other end to help push pieces through the blade. Once we've got the outline shape drafted in pencil, we're gonna go over it with Sharpie and walk it over to the bandsaw where we're gonna cut out the outline of our piece. With the outline cut out, we go back to the drawing board and carve out the handle portion of the push stick. Same thing, we're gonna draft it with a pencil, we're gonna go over it with Sharpie, but this time we're gonna use a drill bit and a jigsaw to cut out the inner portion of the handle. Now with the inside of the handle roughly cut, we're gonna take it over to a drum sander attachment that we have for our drill press and sand the inside portion of the handle to the shape that we want it. Now we could use the drum sander for doing the outside as well, but instead I'm going to go over to our belt sander and use that to do the outside of our push stick. Now with the inside and outside shapes the way that we want it, I'm gonna go over it with a random orbital sander. We happen to have a 3M orbital sander that we're gonna go over and smooth out all the sides, edges, inside edges, and make sure that it's perfectly smooth. Now that it's sanded smooth, I'm going to take it over to the sink and I'm going to wash it out just to get all the sawdust out of the laser engraved portions of the push stick. Now that it's washed out, we're just going to let it dry, give it a light hand sanding, and that's it. We're done. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. As always, stay safe, stay creative, and make something awesome.